When I was growing up, I was a huge Michael Jordan fan. I could tell you all of the stats. I could tell you about his scoring titles, his MVPs, his championships. I knew a lot about Michael Jordan. And when he played, I was always there to cheer him on. Not there, but I was watching on television as he played, rooting for him. I had a huge poster of Michael Jordan hanging in my room on the wall. I was just a big fan. But you know what was next to my Jordan poster on my wall in my room? True story, this big picture of Jesus was right there next to him. I had a Jordan poster, and essentially I had a Jesus poster right next to him. And I think that kind of captures how I approached Jesus. I was a fan of Jesus like I was a fan of Jordan. I knew all the relevant data. I could tell you the statistics. I could tell you the stories. I knew a lot about Michael. I knew a lot about Jesus, but I didn't really know him. There's a big difference between knowing about and knowing. There's a difference between knowledge and intimacy. And this is the difference between a fan and a follower. I think for a long time that I confused my knowledge about Jesus for my intimacy with him. I knew about his life, and I knew the right verses in the Bible. Even as a kid, I remember my parents teaching me very young to have the 66 books of the Bible memorized, from Genesis to Revelation in order. And so I had those 66 books memorized, and then I thought, if that's impressive, that means I'm a really committed Christian. Then what if I could say them in one breath? And so that's what I worked on. I remember practicing that as a kid, trying to say the books of the Bible in one breath until finally I got it. You want to hear it? You want to hear me say the books of the Bible in one breath? Pretty impressive. Just want to prepare you in advance. It has no practical purpose. But I'll try it. Genesis through Revelation. Here we go. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel, 1 Kings, 1 Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Psalm, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Isaiah, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nehemiah, Becky, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1 Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1 Thessalonians, 1 Timothy, Titus, Philemon, Hebrews, James, 2 Peter, 1 3 John, Jude, and Revelation. I'm just waiting for the applause to die down. I know, it's impressive, right? And it's a good thing I can do that, because you know what's going to happen one day. We'll stand before Jesus, and here's what Jesus is going to do on the day of judgment. He's going to say, let's do it this way. Everyone who can say the books of the one Bible in one breath, you come over here. And if you can't do that, then, I'll give you 2 tries. But if you can't do that, then just go down the steps behind you, and when you think you've gone too far, just keep going. And that's how it's going to work. Probably not. I don't think it's going to get me any extra credit in heaven. I wish it did. I wish that's what really mattered, because it would be so much easier if it was just knowing about. But that's not what he's interested in. He wants us to know him and to be known by him. And so when Jesus invites us to follow him in Luke 9:23, he puts it this way. He says, if anyone would come after me, he must take up his cross and follow me. And the phrase I want to point out to you is the phrase come after. It's a phrase that literally means a passionate pursuit. It's a phrase that you would expect to hear describing a romantic relationship where a guy is getting to know a girl or wanting to get to know her, where he's interested in her and pursuing her. And he thinks about her when he wakes up and when he falls asleep, and he's going to great lengths to know and to be known by her. When I was dating my soon-to-be wife, she borrowed my car and went to visit her family in Kansas, middle of nowhere, Kansas. And while she was away, I just started to miss her, and I wanted to be with her, but I had no way to get to her. And so one night, in the middle of the night, I woke up and was just kind of homesick to see her and wanted to tell her I love her and wanted to see her. So I wake up my buddy, who's my roommate, and he's sleeping in the room, across the room, and I said, I miss her, I want to go see her. He said, well, let's go, I'll go with you. But he didn't have a car either, so we really didn't have any way to get there. And suddenly I had what seemed like a brilliant idea in the middle of the night. I said, what if we just ride our bikes over to her house? It's an 80-mile journey, but we're in good shape. He was up for it. He thought, that's great, let's ride bikes. Problem, neither of us had a bike. We didn't own bicycles, not since we were kids. And then we remembered that there was this place on our college campus where All the people with bikes kept their bikes, and we thought, what harm could be done in just borrowing a couple of bikes for the day? And so not knowing anything about bikes, we grabbed a couple. I grabbed a Walmart special. Probably not the bike you want to ride 80 miles down the flat roads of Kansas with a constant headwind against you. But I didn't know. And so after a few hours, we were exhausted. We parked the bikes in this ditch, and we fall asleep, take a little nap there on the side of the road. I wake up, this is true, with a state trooper's boot on my shoulder, jostling me awake. And I think his words were something like, "Are you boys smoking something? Why are you riding your bikes across Kansas?" And we tried to convince him that we were not high. And I said, I wanted to be with my fiance, and so we're making this journey. He rolled his eyes and drove away. He thought I was crazy for doing something like that. When we finally get there to Kansas, my wife is surprised to see us. She has kind of a similar response to the state trooper, really. She thought we were nuts. But the moment I saw her, I knew it was worth it. It was worth it. And I could probably tell you a half dozen other stories of how I have come after her, how I've pursued my wife. I could tell you how I've delivered furniture in the heat of the summer for minimum wage, but enjoyed it because the money was going towards a wedding ring. And I could tell you about the time in college I pulled an all-nighter to finish a 30-page research paper that she needed to have turned in the next day. I could tell you about donating plasma so I could buy her a dozen roses. All kinds of things I have done because I want to know her and I want to be known by her. My question is, could I tell some stories like that about my relationship with Jesus? Am I following him with that kind of passionate pursuit? In the Bible, we read about this group of religious leaders known as the Pharisees. And the Pharisees, they knew a lot about God. And by the time they were 12, they would have had the first 5 books of the Bible memorized. But the thing is, with all of their knowledge, they were missing out on what Jesus was really looking for. And though they had studied him, and they knew these messianic prophecies, when he was there in front of them, they didn't even know it was him. They didn't know him. And in Matthew chapter 15, verse 8, Jesus describes the Pharisees this way. He says, "These people, they honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." Yeah, you know what? They say the right things. They do the right things. But their hearts aren't there. Their hearts are far from me. And he wasn't looking for knowledge. He was looking for intimacy. Many of us grew up in the church, I think, just hearing a lot about making a decision to believe. But we didn't hear as much about a commitment to follow with our whole hearts. It's not just this mental assent. It's not just a decision we make with our minds. It's a commitment we make with our hearts as we come after him and we follow him. And Jesus doesn't want just this casual relationship where we know the stats and we know the data. He wants all of us. It's not unusual for me to talk to parents who are sometimes concerned because they have a college-age child who has left home, gone to school, and just kind of walked away from their faith, walked away from Jesus. Oftentimes, when I talk to these parents, they want to know 2 things. They want to know, 1, how did it happen? And 2, what do I do now? No easy answers here. Usually I listen to their story and after a few moments offer what encouragement I can, and then I pray for them. But a few months ago, I was speaking at this church in Houston, Texas, and this good-sized man, kind of a Texas big guy with this good-sized belt buckle came up, and he had tears in his eyes. And he started to tell me the story of his prodigal daughter and how she had walked away from the faith and how she didn't want to have anything to do with God. But he wasn't looking for an explanation. In fact, in one sentence, he put his finger on what he thought had happened in the case of his daughter. And here's what he said. He said, "We raised her in church, but we didn't raise her in Christ." We raised her in church, but we didn't raise her in Christ. In other words, she grew up learning to be a fan of Jesus. She knew all about him, but she didn't really know him. Listen, more than knowledge, Jesus wants your love. More than just your head, He wants your heart.